Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and support our new movement by putting Let's Go Viral in the comment section. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. But without further ado, here are your hosts, Nicely Chunga Benny and Greg King.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast, members of the Off the Ball Network. And today we're going to be bringing you guys another quick NBA comparison video like we have in the past. We're bringing back our Who's Better series, and today we're going to be comparing who the better player is individually between LaMelo Ball and Darius Garland. But before we get started with today's episode, I got a quick announcement for you all. Unfortunately, Greg King of the Ball Fake Podcast, our former co-host, he's no longer going to be available to be a part of our recording sessions anymore, given the fact that, it was just very tough for us to come to a common agreement in terms of, just being able to record on a consistent basis. And it's not his fault. We both have very busy schedules. He's a Division I track athlete. He also is balancing his college education, and not to mention he's also got an internship while trying to do the podcast. It was a little bit overwhelming for the both of us. So we just came to the agreement that, we would just focus on what we think is more important to our lives as of right now. And, we wish Greg the best. Hopefully we can have him come back on the podcast in the future and, just drop some knowledge on some of these basketball topics that might be coming up in the near future. We would really appreciate that. But if you guys could leave Greg a nice little appreciation comment in the comment section, I would greatly appreciate that. And I'm sure Greg would as well. He's been a big part as to why we've been able to accomplish so much in just so little time. But with all that being said, let's get straight into today's episode because we got a very intriguing one. LaMelo Ball versus Darius Garland. It's a really interesting topic, right? Both of these guys are all-star caliber point guards, and both of them have been really conducive to their team success so far this season. I mean, LaMelo Ball, this is a guy that is leading one of the better offenses in the entire NBA. He's one of the better young assets in the entire NBA at the age of 20 years old, and he's already accomplished so much. He's fresh off a Rookie of the Year campaign. This is a guy that is very electrifying, and he's really fun to watch. I mean, him and Miles Bridges, that connection, the Airbnb connection, is something that you just do not want to miss out on. And as far as Darius Garland's game individually, I mean, he's one of the better young small point guards in today's game. Very undersized, but it doesn't bother him at all, and it hasn't really been something that has hindered his game to a certain degree, right? This is a guy that's putting up all-star caliber numbers, still top 10 in the NBA in terms of assists. He's averaging 19 points per game, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're no longer considered bottom feeders. He's part of a team that is essentially towards the top of the Eastern Conference, which says a lot because the Eastern Conference features a lot of playoff teams. I can name just probably 10 to maybe even 11 legit playoff teams in the Eastern Conference, and the fact that Darius Garland has led the Cleveland Cavaliers to a top 5 seed in that conference really says a lot. But today I want to break down these players' games individually, and I want to start off with the scoring perspective. As far as LaMelo's game from that aspect, this is a guy that's averaging 19 points per game, 7 assists, 7 rebounds, and he's shooting 41% from the field, 36% from 3 at the time of this recording. He's also been somebody that's been able to be at the helm of the Charlotte Hornets offense that features a lot of three-point shooters, a lot of guys that are capable of putting the ball in the basket. And I think to a certain degree, it doesn't necessarily hurt his opportunities in terms of scoring the basketball, especially given LaMelo Ball's best attribute is passing. That kind of elevates that attribute of his game, but he's not really somebody that they look to score, to put the ball in the basket. Okay, LaMelo Ball, we need you to give us 25 off 50, 40, 90 splits. That's not necessarily his job, but given the fact that he's still able to give you 19, 7, and 7, I think that says a lot. And, recently he just became the 4th player in NBA history to average 18, 7, and 7. The other 3 guys to accomplish this feat were Magic Johnson, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic, all at the age of 20. And I think this is something that we can kind of, take bits and pieces of and, kind of put a little bit of a trajectory on LaMelo Ball's career. Not saying he's going to go down as a top 10 player of all time or anything like that, but he is looking like he's going to have a really solid career, could potentially go down as a Hall of Famer. And, he's very loved in the city of Charlotte for right reasons. But from a scoring perspective, LaMelo Ball, he's got broad shot selection, very simple. He's either going to take the 3-pointer from long distance or he's going to look to get all the way to the rim. And due to the fact that you would think that given his intangibles, him being a revolutionized version of what the point guard position looks like in today's modern era, standing at 6'7" with a long wingspan, sneaky athleticism, and being a finesse guard, he would be able to manipulate the defense enough to be able to get off some good quality shots around the rim. But his field goal percentage says otherwise. He's shooting around 57% around the rim, well below league average from that standpoint. You would think he would at least be sub 60% from that aspect, but he's just struggled around the rim from that perspective. And I think a lot of it has to do with just concentration. He's not the strongest athlete in the world. A lot of times it's easy for him to get knocked off of his spot, and I think the fact that his game from an offensive perspective lacks a mid-range aspect, he's not that dynamic from that, and he's not necessarily looking to do that, so to speak. I think that makes it a lot easier and a lot predictable for the defense to stop him on a nightly basis just from that aspect, given they know he's looking to get all the way to the rim. But he's not really somebody that's looking to do too much off the dribble in terms of creating his own shot. Kind of struggles with creating separation for himself individually. He's not an isolation type of point guard. He can break you down, but he's more so looking to be somebody that's going to be facilitating the basketball rather than trying to create his own shot in certain aspects of the game, so to speak, from that standpoint. But as a half-court scorer, it's not really something that I wouldn't say he struggles with it, but he's very three-point oriented, and not necessarily the fact that he shoots a lot of three-pointers, because he doesn't really have that high of a volume of that in today's modern era, if you ask me. But I think if his three ball isn't following, he's not going to have the most efficient night, because he's not the greatest two-point shooter in the world. And, he's just a very inefficient player as a guard, so to speak, at least as of right now. But he is more than likely subdued to, changing this. I think he's got a lot of talent offensively, but from a scoring perspective, I think Darius Garland's probably the better player from that aspect, right? He can kill you from all facets within the pick and roll. He's one of the top players in the NBA in terms of points per possession in those scenarios, ranks in the 89th percentile in isolation scoring scenarios, and in the pick and roll, he's shooting 47% on those shots in those scenarios as well. He essentially is the ideal scoring point guard. The only difference is, he's not as tall as some of these guys like LaMelo Ball or the Luka Doncic's of the world, and I think that kind of, hurts his game in terms of him finishing around the basket, obviously, going into the paint in the restricted area, trying to finish amongst the trees and all that good stuff. But outside of that, he's a really more efficient player than LaMelo Ball, on the cusp of having a 50-40-90 season. This is a guy that, passes the eye test. He has great instincts, and he's very shifty, a very shifty and crafty type of guard. This is somebody that, is shooting nearly 50% on all of his two-point attempts, right? And the fact that he can establish separation so well, and he just manipulates the defense in all facets, whether it's individually in isolation scenarios or in the pick and roll, I just feel a lot more comfortable going with Darius Garland from a scoring perspective. And not to mention, his catch and shoot numbers kind of match up with LaMelo Ball's at the time of this recording. And individually, I just think that he has a little bit more impact from that standpoint, right? There's not too many weaknesses offensively for him outside of him going to the left side of the floor. He typically doesn't finish on his drives that well in those aspects. But outside of that, Darius Garland, I think he's a better scorer in between him and LaMelo Ball. But from a passing standpoint, this was really tough to kind of come to a conclusion with in terms of who I think is better. But LaMelo Ball, he's very flamboyant as a passer. We know this is his superpower. He's extremely gifted. He's one of those guys that's not afraid to make any read. And to a certain degree, I think that hurts his efficiency as a passer at times, because he will get caught getting a little bit sloppy. Sometimes his ball handling isn't up to speed and he's a little bit off balance, and the decision making at times, given the fact that he's not afraid to make any pass, he'll try passes that are quite unopen and do a little bit more than he needs to from that standpoint, right? But I think he does a great job in terms of identifying cutters. He knows his personnel of his teammates pretty well, especially Miles Bridges. That's his favorite target, and he's got his highest frequency of assists coming from Miles Bridges. And one thing that I think he does need to do a better job with is just being able to dictate pace, get the game controlled like a point guard, like what a Rajon Rondo or Chris Paul is able to do if things get a little bit out of hand. We know defensively, the Charlotte Hornets give up a lot of runs due to the fact that they don't really have the personnel that's all that adequate to stopping opposing teams on the offensive side of the basketball. But, I think in those terms, in the pick and roll, LaMelo Ball could be a little bit better in terms of, just making second level reads. if you take away his first read, he's kind of caught in no man's land, and you would like for him to, just be a little bit more confident, just to the degree that he's going to be able to be somebody that can make something happen out of nothing. But I think LaMelo Ball, he's still a pretty good passer. Obviously, he's ranked 9th in the NBA in terms of assists. His turnovers could be a little bit daunting to his game from a facilitating aspect, but essentially, this is a guy that is a pretty good playmaker, and I think the fact that he lacks the mid-range kind of makes it a little bit more easier for teams to kind of game plan for where he's going to pass the ball to and things of that nature. But outside of that, LaMelo Ball, he's a very adequate passer in my opinion. Just needs to do a better job just in terms of being more composed, making sure that he's making the proper reads offensively and dictating what the offense needs to do on a nightly basis and following the game plan. But as far as Darius Garland, he's very good in terms of just being one of the better facilitators in the entire NBA. He ranks 7th in the NBA in terms of assists. He's one of the primary initiators of Cleveland's offense. He's an excellent playmaker, makes advanced reads in the pick and roll. He can make stuff happen on his own, and essentially he can dictate pace and initiate the offense to the best degree that anybody on the Cleveland Cavaliers can. And he's not one of those. Him and LaMelo Ball, neither one of those guys are really all that ball dominant. Their usage rates at around 27 to 26%. So it's not like they're ball hogging or anything like that. And given the fact that they're one of the better facilitators in the entire NBA in terms of, statistics, Darius Garland, these two guys, they're just extremely special from those standpoints, right? He understands his personnel, knows his guys' sweet spots, and he's just looking to make the right play. And when he does turn it over, it's typically due to the fact that he's trying to make the correct read that can help put, his team over the top in comparison to, other point guards in the NBA who are turning the ball over due to a lack of handle, a lack of understanding, or just having bad offensive IQ. But I think in terms of, passing skill set, I will go with Darius Garland from this standpoint, just given he's a little bit more efficient from this aspect, not so turnover prone. He can get his guys open in transition in the half court setting, make something happen out of nothing, and all that good stuff. But defensively is the last category I want to talk about. And unfortunately, this is just another category that is not LaMelo Ball's strong suit. He's not that adequate of a defender on ball. Off ball, he's a little bit better as a team defender. I think sometimes he gets caught over helping in certain scenarios, and he could have a little bit of a higher defensive IQ. I will say that. I think watching film is something that will help him in that area, obviously. But just understanding personnel, making sure that he's keeping guys in front of him. I think LaMelo Ball's biggest problem defensively is probably the fact that, he's got slow reaction time. He's kind of a half a second late in terms of just reacting to what the offensive team is doing. And sometimes, he just doesn't understand the game plan defensively for what the Charlotte Hornets are looking to do. And but outside of that, he's got quick hands defensively. He's 14th in the NBA in terms of steals. He's a really good rebounding guard, shot blocking capabilities, and he's got the intangibles to be an adequate defender. I think he just needs to be better on ball in terms of, moving his feet laterally. We know he's kind of got slow feet from that standpoint, and just understanding, the game plan and being able to contain his assignment on a nightly basis. He is somebody that is capable of defending, pattern players, but I think sometimes, he just kind of doesn't always seem engaged from that standpoint defensively. But as compared to a guy like Darius Garland, who we understand is somebody that's going to get into your airspace. He's a really underrated defender, doesn't allow too much separation. He's got quick feet, hardly out of position, and he makes you work before the catch. All those things are something that I'm looking for my perimeter defenders to do ideally for us to win games. Teams that don't feature exterior defenders kind of struggle in terms of just being able to limit teams putting points on the board. And I think Cleveland's been one of those teams that hasn't had that problem at all. We understand Jared Allen and Evan Mobley have been phenomenal, and we can't forget about guys like Isaac Okoro and Chris Goodwin, who are great perimeter defenders as well. But I think Darius Garland, he's setting the tone on both ends of the basketball, defensively, offensively, you name it. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons as to why, the Cleveland Cavaliers are having so much success this season. And they're probably going to have, their first playoff appearance for the first time in who knows how many years since LeBron James left the organization. But when I take all this stuff into consideration, the fact that Darius Garland is an underrated defender, understands defensive IQ, he's one of the better passers in the NBA, averaging averaging more assists than LaMelo Ball. He's 7th in that category. And not to mention, he's a much more efficient scorer and a better initiator of the offense and just having a better IQ overall. I think Darius Garland is the better player between him and LaMelo Ball. But you guys let me know what y'all think about this in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode with me on the Ball Fake Podcast. If you're new to our YouTube channel or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. But besides that, it's your boy Nicey Chunga Benny. You're listening to the Ball Fake Podcast, and we out.